Bambi by Felix Salten. Translated by David Willey. It was in a space in a thicket that he came into the world, in one of those little hidden passages in the wood which seem to be open on every side but which in fact are completely surrounded by foliage. That is why there was so little room there, but just enough for him and his mother. He stood up, staggered on his thin legs as he wondered what was happening. Looked out with eyes which were dull, wondered what was happening but saw nothing, dropped his head, shuddered severely, and was quite numb. "What a beautiful child," declared the magpie. She had rushed to the place, drawn by the breathy groans she had heard forced from Bambi's mother by her pain. Now the magpie sat on a branch nearby. "What a beautiful child!" she exclaimed again. No one answered her, and she continued speaking excitedly. "And he can already stand up and walk. That's amazing. That's so interesting. I've never seen anything like it in me life. Well, I'm still young, of course. It's only been a year since I left the nest, but I can expect, you know that. But I think it's wonderful. A child like this, he's only been born a second and he can already stand. I think it's very noble of him. And most of all, I find that everything done by you dear is very noble. Can he already run, too?" "Of course," answered Bambi's mother gently. "But you'll have to excuse me. I'm not really in a good condition to chat with you. There's a lot I've got to do, and besides, I'm feeling quite tired." "Oh, don't let me disturb you," said the magpie. "I'm in a bit of a rush today, too. But it's not every day that you see something like this. I ask you, think of how awkward it is for us in these things, and how much hard work. These children just can't do anything when they first hatch from the egg. They just lie there in the nest quite helpless and need to be looked after. They always need to be looked after, I tell you. I'm sure you've got no idea what it's like. It's so much hard work just to keep 'em fed, and they need to be protected. It's so worrying. I ask you, just how strenuous all that is. Getting food for the children and having to watch over them at the same time so that nothing happens to 'em. If you're not there, they can do nothing for themselves. Am I not right? And you have to wait so long before they start to move. So long before they get their first feathers and they start to look a bit decent." "Please forgive me," Bambi's mother said. "I wasn't really listening." The magpie flew away. Stupid person, she thought to herself. Noble, but stupid. Bambi's mother barely noticed, and continued vigorously washing her newborn. She washed it with her tongue and so performed several tasks at once. Care for his body, a warming massage, and a display of her affection. The little one staggered a little under the weight of the stroking and pushing that gently touched him all over, but he remained still. His red coat, which was still a little unkempt, had a sprinkling of white on it. His face, that of a child, still looked uncomprehending, almost as if he were in a deep sleep. All around them grew hazel bushes, dogwoods, blackthorn bushes, and young elder trees. Lofty maples, beech trees, and oaks created a green roof over the thicket, and from the firm, dark brown ground there sprouted ferns and wild peas and sage. Down close to the ground were the leaves, close together, of violets which were already in bloom, and the leaves of strawberries which were just beginning to bloom. The light of the morning sun pierced its way through the thick foliage like a web of gold. The whole forest was alive with the sounds of countless voices which pierced through the trees in an air of gay excitement. The golden oriole performed a ceaseless song of joy. The doves never stopped cooing, the blackbirds whistled, the finches flapped their wings, the tits chirruped. The quarrelsome screech of the jay penetrated through all this, and the joking laughter of the blue magpie, the bursting, metallic cook-cook of the pheasants. From time to time, the harsh, short celebrations of a woodpecker would pierce through all the other voices. The shrill, bright call of a falcon would penetrate across the forest canopy, and the choir of crows never stopped ringing out their raucous call. The little one understood not one of those many songs and calls, not a word of their conversations. He was still too young to listen to them. He also paid no attention to any of the smells that the forest breathed. He heard only the gentle rustling that ran over his coat as it was washed, warmed and kissed, and he smelt only the body of his mother close by. He nuzzled close to this body with a lovely smell, and hungrily he searched around it and found the source of life. As he drank, his mother continued to pet him. "Bambi," she whispered. Every few moments she would lift her head, listen, and draw the wind in. Then she kissed her child again, reassured and happy. "Bambi," she repeated. "My little Bambi." Chapter 2. Now, in the early summer, the trees stood still under the blue sky. They held their arms out wide and received the power of the sun as it streamed down on them. The bushes in the thicket were coming into bloom with stars of white or red or yellow. On many of them the buds of fruit were beginning to be seen. Countless many of them were sitting on the fine tips of the branches. Tender and firm and resolute they looked, like little clenched fists. The colorful stars of many different flowers came up from the ground, so that the earth, in the subdued light of the forest, was a spray of silent but vigorous and gay colors. Everywhere there was the smell of a fresh foliage, of flowers, of the soil, of green wood. When morning broke, and when the sun went down, the whole wood was alive with 1,000 voices. And all day, from morning to evening, the bees sang, the wasps buzzed, and the bumblebees buzzed even louder through the fragrant stillness. That is what the days were like when Bambi experienced his earliest childhood. He followed his mother onto the narrow strip that led between the bushes. It was so pleasant to walk here. The dense foliage stroked his sides gently and bent gently to the side. Everywhere you looked the path seemed to be blocked and locked, but it was possible to go forward in the greatest comfort. There were routes like this in the woods. They formed a network going all through the forest. Bambi's mother knew them all, and whenever he stood in front of what seemed to him like an impenetrable green wall, she would immediately seek out the place where the path began. Bambi asked her questions. He was very fond of asking his mother questions. For him, it was the nicest thing in the world to keep asking her questions and to listen to whatever answer she gave. Bambi was not at all surprised that he always thought of one question after another to ask her. It seemed entirely natural to him. It was such a delight for him. It was also a delight to wait, curious, until the answer came. And whatever the answer was, he was always satisfied with it. There were times, of course, when he did not understand the answer he was given. But that was nice, too, because he could always ask more questions whenever he wanted to. Sometimes he stopped asking questions, and that was nice, too, because then he was busy trying to understand what he had been told, and would work it out in his own way. He often felt certain that his mother had not given him a complete answer, that she deliberately avoided saying everything she knew, and that was very nice, as it left behind a certain kind of curiosity still in him, feeling of something mysterious and pleasing that ran through him, an expectation that made him uneasy but cheerful. Now he asked, "Who owns this path, Mother?" His mother answered, "We do." Bambi continued asking, "You and me?" "Yes." "Both of us?" "Yes." "Just you and me?" "No," said his mother. "We deer own it." "What's a deer?" asked Bambi with a laugh. His mother looked at him and laughed too. "You're a deer, and I'm a deer. That's what deer are. Do you understand now?" Bambi jumped into the air with laughter. "Yes, I understand. I'm a little deer, and you're a big deer. That's right, isn't it?" His mother nodded. "There, you see now." Bambi became serious again. "Are we the only ones, or are there other deer?" "Certainly," said his mother. "There are lots of them." "Where are they?" Bambi exclaimed. "They're here. They're all around us. But I can't see them." "You'll see them soon enough." "When?" Bambi's curiosity was so strong that he stopped walking. "Soon," his mother calmly walked on. Bambi followed her. He said nothing, for he was trying to work out what she could have meant by soon. He reached the conclusion that soon was certainly not the same as very soon, but he was not able to decide when it was that the soon would stop being soon and start to be a long time yet. Suddenly he asked, "Who was it who made this path?" "We did," his mother replied. Bambi was astonished. "We did? You and me?" His mother said, "Well, yes, we deer made it." "What deer?" Bambi asked. "All of us," was his mother's curt reply. They walked on. Bambi had had enough of it and wanted to jump off away from the path, but he was a good child and stayed with his mother. Ahead of them there was a rustling noise, coming from somewhere close to the ground. There was something moving vigorously, something concealed under the ferns of wild lettuce. A little voice, as thin as a thread, let out a pitiful whistle, and then it was quiet. Only the leaves and the blades of grass quivered to show where it was that something had happened. A polecat had caught a mouse. Then he dashed past them, crouched down to one side, and set to on his meal. "What was that?" asked Bambi excitedly. "Nothing," his mother reassured him. "But," Bambi stuttered, "but I saw it." Well, yes, his mother said, but don't be frightened. A polecat killed a mouse. But Bambi was terribly frightened. His heart was squeezed within a great but unfamiliar horror. It was a long time before he could speak again. Then he asked, why did he kill the mouse? Because, his mother hesitated. Then she said, let's go a bit faster, shall we? As if she had suddenly thought of something else and forgotten about the question, she began to trot. Bambi hopped along after her. A long pause went by, and they had stopped walking so fast. Finally, Bambi, feeling rather anxious, asked, will we ever kill a mouse? No, his mother answered. Never? Asked Bambi. No, never, came her reply. Why not? Asked Bambi with some relief. Because we never kill anyone, his mother told him simply. Bambi became cheerful again. There was a young ash tree next to their path from which a loud screeching could be heard. His mother paid no attention to it and carried on walking. But Bambi was curious and stopped. High in the tree's branches there were 2 jays squabbling over a nest they had just plundered. You get out of it, you lout! Don't get excited, you fool, the other answered. I'm not afraid of you. Go and get your own nests, you thief, yelled the first. I'll punch your face in. He was beside himself. You're just vile, he snapped. Just vile. The other bird noticed Bambi. He flapped a few twigs down and snarled. What are you looking at, brat? Get lost. Bambi felt intimidated and jumped away from them. Once he had reached his mother, he continued walking behind her along the path, obedient and startled. He thought she had not noticed he had stayed behind. After a while, he asked her, Mother, what does vile mean? His mother said, I don't know. Bambi thought about it, and then he began again. Mother, why were those 2 being so nasty to each other? His mother answered, they were quarreling about getting the food. Bambi asked, will we ever quarrel about food like that? No, his mother said. Why not? Bambi asked. His mother replied, there's plenty of food for all of us. There was something else that Bambi wanted to know. Mother. What is it? Will we ever be nasty to each other too? No, my child, said his mother. We don't do that sort of thing. They carried on walking. Suddenly they saw light ahead of them, very bright light. The green confusion of bushes and shrubs came to an end. Their path was at its end. Just a few steps further, and they came out into the brightly lit free space that opened up ahead of them. Bambi wanted to jump up, but his mother just stood there where she was. What's that? He exclaimed, impatient and quite enchanted. The meadow, his mother answered. What's that, the meadow? Bambi insisted. His mother gave a curt reply. You'll see for yourself soon enough. She had become serious and attentive. She stood there without moving, her head held up high, listening tensely, testing the wind with deep breaths, and she looked almost severe. Yes, everything's all right, she finally said. We can go on out there. Bambi was about to jump ahead, but she blocked his way. No, you wait until I call you. Bambi did as he was told and immediately stood still. Well done, Bambi, his mother praised him. Now listen carefully to what I say. Bambi listened carefully as his mother spoke and saw how agitated she was. He became very tense himself. Going out onto the meadow is not as simple as it seems, his mother continued. It's difficult and it's dangerous. Don't ask me why. You'll learn later on. For now, just do exactly what I tell you. Will you do that? Yes, Bambi promised. Good. So I'll go out there first by myself. You stay here and wait, and don't take your eyes off me. Keep me in sight and don't look away, not for a second. If you see me start to run back here, then turn around and run away as fast as you can. I'll soon catch up with you. She became silent and seemed to be thinking, even then. With much emphasis, she went on. Whatever happens, run, run, run as fast as you can. Run even if something happens. Even if you see me fall to the ground, don't pay any attention to me, understand? Whatever you see or hear, just keep going, without delay and as fast as you can. Do you promise me that? Yes, said Bambi quietly. But if I call you, his mother continued, you can come. You can come and play on the meadow. It's nice there. You'll like it. Only, this is something else you have to promise me. If I call you, you must be at my side straight away, whatever the circumstances. Do you hear? Yes, said Bambi, even quieter. His mother was being so serious. She continued speaking. Out there, if I call you, there's no running about and no questions. You're to run behind me like the wind. Don't forget. No thinking about it, no hesitating. If I start to run, it means you get up immediately and get out of there. And you don't stop until we're back here in the woods. You won't forget that, will you?" "No," said Bambi, feeling rather anxious. "All right, now I'll go," his mother told him, and seemed somewhat calmer. She stepped out onto the meadow. Bambi, who did not take his eyes off her, saw how she went forward with slow and high steps. He stood there full of anticipation, full of fear and curiosity. He saw how his mother listened on every side. He saw her when something startled her, and felt startled himself, ready to jump back into the thicket. Then his mother became calm once more, and after a minute had passed she became cheerful. She lowered her neck, stretched it out far in front of her, looked contentedly back at Bambi, and called, "Come on, then." Bambi jumped forward. He was gripped with an enormous joy that was so magically strong that he forgot about the anxiety he had felt just before. All he had been able to see while he was in the thicket was the green treetops above him, and he saw the few scraps of blue above them only in short, rare glimpses. Now he could see the whole of the sky, high and wide and blue, and that made him glad, although he did not know why. Among the trees, all he had seen of the sun had been single broken rays or the gentle scattering of golden light that played between the branches. Now he suddenly found himself standing in a hot and dazzling power that forced itself on him. He stood within this copious blessing of warmth that closed his eyes and opened his heart. Bambi was exhilarated. He was completely beside himself, and it was simply wonderful. He spontaneously jumped into the air, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times on the spot where he stood. He could not help himself. He had to do it. Something yanked him up and made him jump. His young limbs had such powerful spring in them. The air went so deep and easily into his lungs that he drank in all of the fragrances of the meadow with so much overpowering cheer that he simply had to jump. Bambi was a child. If he had been a human child, he would have shouted with joy. But he was a young deer, and deer cannot shout, or at least not in the same way that human children do. So he rejoiced in his own way, with his legs, with his whole body that threw him into the air. His mother stood nearby and was glad to watch him. She watched him going crazy. She saw him as he threw himself up high, dropped clumsily back down on the same spot, stared ahead in confusion and exhilaration, and then, in the next moment, threw himself back into the air over and over again. She understood that Bambi had only ever seen the narrow deer paths in the woods in the few days of his existence, had only ever become used to the narrowness of the thicket, and that he therefore did not move from the spot where he stood because he still did not understand that he was free to run around in the whole of the meadow. She stretched out her forelegs and lowered herself onto them, gave a little laugh to Bambi, and she was suddenly away, rushing around in circles, so tall the tall grass swished loudly. Bambi was startled and remained motionless. Was that meant to mean he should go back into the woods? "Don't bother about me," his mother had said. "Whatever you see, whatever you hear, just get away as fast as you can." He wanted to turn around and run as he had been told. Then his mother suddenly came galloping towards him, making a wonderful noise. She came within 2 steps from him, lowered her body as she had done the first time, laughed at him and called, "Try and catch me," and rushed away from him. Bambi was astonished. What was all this supposed to mean? What had come over his mother all of a sudden? But then she was coming back again with such an enormous speed. It was enough to make you dizzy. She poked him in the side with her nose and quickly said, "Try and catch me," and rushed away. Bambi stumbled after her, a few steps, but those steps soon became little jumps. They carried him. He thought he was flying. They carried him by themselves. There was a space under his steps, space under his jumps, space. Bambi was beside himself. The grass made a glorious sound under his steps. The grass made a glorious sound in his ears. It was deliciously soft, as tender as silk, as he skimmed across it. His mother stood still for a while as she caught her breath. She only moved in the direction of Bambi as she rushed by. Bambi flew like the wind. Suddenly it stopped. Bambi stopped running and went over to his mother in an elegant, high-stepping trot, where he looked happily into her face. Then they walked along contentedly beside each other. Since he had come out here into the open, Bambi had seen the sky, the sun, and the wide stretch of green only with his body, only with a blinkered, drunken glance at the sky, with the cozy feeling of warmth on his back, and the invigorating feel of the sun that made him take ever deeper breaths. Now, for the first time, he began to enjoy the glory of the meadow, which surprised him with new wonders with every step he took. There were no scraps of bare earth that could be seen as there were among the trees. Here every spot was covered with dense grass, every blade cuddled close with others which swelled up in abundant glory, leant gently to one side under each step, and immediately sprang back upright with no sense of insult. The broad green plain was starry with white daisies, with violets, with thick red heads of the clover as it began to blossom, and with the shining majesty of the golden flowers held up high by the dandelions. "Look, Mother," Bambi called. "There's a flower flying away." "That's not a flower," his mother said. "That's a butterfly." Bambi was delighted and watched the butterfly as it gently freed itself from the stalk of the grass, and, in tumbling flight, floated away. Now Bambi saw that there were many such butterflies flying in the air over the meadow. They seemed to be in a hurry, but they were slow. They tumbled up and down in a game that enchanted him. They really did look like flowers moving about, gay flowers that did not want to just keep still on their stalks and had got up to have a little dance, or like flowers that had come down with the sun, still had not found a place for themselves, and were looking carefully round for one. They would sink down and disappear as if they had already found a place, but then they would fly straight up again, just a little way at first, and then higher in order to carry on with their search, always seeking because the best places were already occupied. Bambi looked at all of them. He would so have liked to see one of them close up, would have so liked to examine just one of them, but he was not able to. They never stopped flitting about between each other. It made him quite dizzy. When he once again looked down at the ground, everything he saw brought him 1,000 delights, nimble, living things that flew up when he stepped near them. All around him there was something jumping and sprinkling in the air, something that became visible in a tumultuous swarm and, the next second, sank back into the green ground it had come from. "What's that, Mother?" he asked. "That's the little ones," she answered. "Look," called Bambi, "there's a piece of grass jumping up. It's jumping up so high." "That's not grass," his mother explained. "It's a nice grasshopper." "Why does it jump like that?" asked Bambi. "Because we're moving about," his mother answered. "It's frightened." "Oh!" Bambi went over to the grasshopper, which was sitting right in the white dish of a daisy. "Oh," Bambi said politely, "you don't need to be frightened. We certainly won't do anything to you." "I'm not frightened," the grasshopper retorted in a rasping voice. "I was just a bit startled at first, as I was speaking to my wife." "Please excuse us for disturbing you," said Bambi modestly. "That doesn't matter," the grasshopper rasped. "As it's you, it doesn't matter. But you never know who might be coming, and you have to watch out for yourself." "I haven't been out here on the meadow before," Bambi told him. "My mother—" The grasshopper stood there with his head lowered in a way that made him look very cross. His face looked serious, and he grumbled. "I'm not interested in that. I haven't got time to be here chatting with you. I've got to go and find my wife. Hop!" And he was gone. "Hop," said Bambi, rather puzzled and astonished at the height of the leap the grasshopper had made as he disappeared. Bambi ran to his mother. "Listen, I've just been talking with him." "With who?" his mother asked. "Well, with the grasshopper," Bambi explained. "I was talking with him. He was so friendly to me. And I liked him so much. He's so green. It's wonderful. And on his back you can see right through him. There aren't any leaves like that, not even the finest leaf." "That was his wings." "Was it?" Bambi continued speaking. "And he's got such a serious face, as if he were thinking hard about something. But he was so friendly to me anyway, and he can jump so high. That must be awfully hard. 'Hop,' he said, and he jumped so high that I couldn't see him any more." They walked on. Bambi was very excited about his conversation with the grasshopper, and he was a little tired, as it was the first time he had talked with a stranger. He was hungry, and pressed close to his mother so that he could refresh himself. Then, when he was once more standing there for a while, he stared ahead of him in a sweet little inebriation that always enveloped him when he had drunk all he had wanted from his mother. He saw a whitish flower down in the tangle of grass stems. It moved. Bambi looked closer. No, that was not a flower. It was a butterfly. Bambi crept closer. The butterfly was hanging listlessly on the stem of grass, and it gently moved his wings about. "Please, stay where you are," Bambi called to him. "Why should I stay where I am? I am a butterfly, after all," he asked in astonishment. "Oh, please stay where you are, just for a little while," Bambi begged him. "I've been wanting to see you close up for so long now. Please be so kind." "All right, then," said the little white butterfly, "but not for too long." Bambi stood in front of him. "You're so beautiful," he said in enchantment. "So beautiful, like a flower." "What?" The butterfly clapped his wings. "Like a flower? Well, everyone I know agrees that we're much more beautiful than flowers." Bambi was confused at that. Yes, certainly," he stuttered. "Much more beautiful. Please forgive me. I just wanted to say—" "I don't really care what you wanted to say," the butterfly retorted. He started to show off by curving his narrow body and playing idly with his sensitive antennae. Bambi was enthralled and continued to watch him. "You're so elegant," he said. "So fine and so elegant. And those white wings of yours, they're so majestic." The butterfly lay his wings wide open. Then he put them together above him, where they looked like the taut sail of a yacht. "Oh!" exclaimed Bambi. "Now I understand how you're more beautiful than the flowers. And you can fly as well. Flowers can't do that. They have to stay where they're growing. That's how." The butterfly raised himself up. "That's enough now," he said. "I can fly." And he lifted himself into the air with such ease that it could not be seen and it could not be understood. His white wings moved gently and full of grace, and he was already drifting there in the air and the sunshine. "It was only for your sake that I remained sitting there for so long," he said, and he jiggled up and down in front of Bambi. "But now I will fly away." That was the meadow. Chapter 3. Deep in among the trees was a place that belonged to Bambi's mother. It lay only a few steps from the narrow path used by the deer as they made their way through the wood, but it was nearly impossible to find for anyone who did not know there was a little gap through the dense bushes was. It was only a narrow space, so narrow that it just had room for Bambi and his mother to fit in, and it was so low that when Bambi's mother stood up, her head would be in among the branches and twigs. Hazel bushes, gorse, and dogwood all grew here, tangled in among each other, and the little sunlight that came down through the forest canopy would be caught by them so it never reached as far as the ground. This was the room where Bambi came into the world, and this was where he and his mother made their home. Now his mother lay asleep, pressed down on the ground. Bambi had slept a little too, but now he had become quite lively. He stood up and looked around. Here, deep in the woods, it was shadowy, it was almost dark. The wood could be heard gently rustling and soughing. Here and there the tits chirruped. Here and there the bright laughter of a woodpecker or the cheerless bark of a crow. All else, near and far, was quiet. Only the air became warm in the heat of midday, and even that could be heard if you listened carefully. Here in the woods it was humid and sweltering. Bambi looked down at his mother. "Are you asleep?" No, his mother was not sleeping. She had woken up straight away when Bambi had stood up. "What are we going to do now?" Bambi asked. "Nothing," his mother answered. "We're going to stay just where we are. Just lie down like a good child and go to sleep." But Bambi did not feel like sleeping. "Come on," he begged. "Let's go out to the meadow." His mother raised her head. "To the meadow? Now? To the meadow?" She sounded so astonished and so full of alarm that Bambi became quite frightened. "Can't we go to the meadow now, then?" he asked shyly. "No," came his mother's answer, and it sounded quite conclusive. "That isn't possible right now." "Why not?" asked Bambi as he became aware that there was something very strange going on here. He became more afraid, but at the same time he felt the urge to learn about everything. "Why can't we go to the meadow now?" "You'll learn all about that later, when you're a bit older," his mother reassured him. Bambi was insistent. "Why won't you tell me now?" "Later," his mother repeated. "You're still a little child," she continued gently. "And you don't talk about things like this with little children." She had become very serious. "Now, on the meadow, I just don't want to think of it, in broad daylight." "But when we went to the meadow," Bambi objected, "it was broad daylight then, too." "That was different," his mother explained. "It was early in the morning." "Can you only go there early in the morning, then?" Bambi had become too inquisitive. His mother remained patient. "Only early in the morning, or late in the evening, or at night." "Not in the daytime? Never?" His mother hesitated. "Yes," she said at last. "Sometimes. There are some of us who go out there in the daytime, too, sometimes. But that's under special conditions. I can't really explain it to you. You're still too little. Some go out there, but they put themselves in great danger." "What is it that's dangerous for them?" By now Bambi was very excited, but his mother did not want to explain it straight away. "They are in danger. Listen, my child. These are things that you won't be able to grasp yet. Bambi thought he would be able to understand anything, but he could not understand why his mother did not want to give him more details, but he said nothing. "This is the way we have to live," his mother went on, "all of us, even if we love the daytime. The children are especially fond of the daytime. We have to live like this. We just have to accept it. We can only move about from the evening until the morning. Can you understand that?" "Yes." "Now, my child, that's why we have to stay here, where we are now. This is where we're safe. That's all there is to it. So now, lie down again and go to sleep." Bambi did not want to lie down again. "What makes us safe where we are now?" he asked. "Because all the bushes are watching over us, because the twigs and the bushes rustle, because the rough brushwood on the ground cracks and gives us warning, because the dead leaves from last year lie on the ground and rustle to give us a sign, because the jays are there, the magpies too. They keep watch over us. That's how we know there's somebody coming along a long time before they reach us." "What's that?" Bambi inquired. "Dead leaves from last year." "Come and sit beside me," said his mother. "I'll tell you all about it." Bambi gladly went and sat behind her and snuggled in close while she explained to him that the trees do not stay green all the time, that the sunshine and the lovely warmth go away. Then it gets cold, the leaves turn yellow because of the frost. They go brown and red, and one by one they fall off the trees so that they and the bushes reach their naked branches to the sky and look completely forlorn. But the dead leaves lie on the ground, and when they're disturbed by somebody's foot, they rustle. There's someone coming. Oh, they're very good, these dead leaves from last year. They do us a good service by being so eager by keeping watch the way they do. And now, in the middle of summer, there are still lots of them hidden under the things growing on the ground, and they warn about any danger long before it gets near." Bambi pressed close against his mother. He forgot all about the meadow. It was so cozy to sit here and listen to what his mother had told him. Then, when his mother stopped speaking, he thought about what she had said. He thought it was very nice of the good old leaves to watch over them so carefully, even though they were dead and had been frozen and gone, though so many things already. He tried to think about that danger that his mother kept talking about could actually be, but all that thinking tired him out. It was all quiet around him. All you could hear was the heat of the air, and he went to sleep. Chapter 4. One evening, when he went back out onto the meadow with his mother, he thought he knew by now about everything that could be seen or heard there, but it turned out that he still did not know as much as he had thought. At first, everything was the same as his first time there. His mother allowed Bambi to play tag with him. He ran round in circles, and the wide open space, the lofty sky, and the freedom of the air were all so exhilarating that he rushed around with joy. After a time, he noticed that his mother was standing still. He stopped suddenly as he was turning, so suddenly that his 4 legs were spread wide apart. He jumped high into the air so that his sudden halt would be more dignified, but now he was standing properly. His mother, a little way away, seemed to be talking with someone, but he could not make out, in the long grass, who that could be. Curious, Bambi went closer. There, in the tangle of the grass stems close in to his mother, were 2 long ears twitching. They were grayish-brown, and the black stripes on them made them quite pretty. Bambi hesitated, but his mother said to him, "Come here, Bambi. This is our friend, the hare. Come on, then. Let him see you." Bambi went up to her straight away. There sat the hare, and very honest he looked. His long ears rose in powerful grandeur high above his head, and then they fell back down and hung limply as if they had been suddenly transformed into something weak. When Bambi saw the hare's whiskers, which extended stiff and straight all around his mouth, he began to think about them. But he noticed that the hare had a very gentle face. All his features seemed to indicate a good nature, and his big round eyes looked modestly out at the world. He really did look like a friend, this hare. The thoughts that had flickered through Bambi's head disappeared immediately. Remarkably enough, and just as quickly, he lost all the respect that he had felt at first. "Good evening, young sir," said the hare with carefully chosen politeness. Bambi merely nodded "good evening" back to him. He did not know why, but all he did was nod. Very friendly, very nicely, though perhaps a little condescending. There was no other way he could do it. Perhaps it was something he was born with. "What a handsome young prince," said the hare to Bambi's mother. He looked at Bambi carefully as he raised one of his ears high into the air, and then, soon after, the other ear, and then, soon after again, both of them, and sometimes he would let them drop suddenly and hang limply. Bambi did not like this. This gesture seemed to be saying, "No, not worth it." The hare continued gently to examine Bambi with his big round eyes. His nose and his mouth, surrounded by his magnificent whiskers, were in a continual movement, like the way someone's nose and lips will twitch when he is trying hard not to sneeze. Bambi could not help laughing, and the hare immediately, with good will, joined in with the laughter, only his eyes became more thoughtful. "I congratulate you," he said to Bambi's mother. "I sincerely congratulate you on having a son like this. Yes, 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 he will be a majestic prince one day. Yes, 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 you can see that at first glance." He raised himself upright, and now sat erect on his back legs, which astonished Bambi immensely. After he had a good look all around, his ears erect and his nose moving vigorously, he sat politely back down on all fours. "Please give my regards to the honorable gentleman," he said. "I have many different things to do this evening. Please give them my humble regards." He turned around and hopped away, his ears pressed down on his shoulders. "Goodbye," called Bambi to him as he went. His mother smiled. He is a good hare, so simple and so modest. It is not easy for him in this world either. There was sympathy in her words. Bambi walked around a little, allowing his mother to eat her food. He hoped he would come across them who he had met earlier, and would also have liked to make some new acquaintances. It was not entirely clear to him what he was missing, but he always felt he was waiting for something. Suddenly he heard a gentle rustling from far across the meadow, and a slight, rapid knocking on the ground. He looked up. Over where the woods began there was something that flitted through the grass. There were two of them. Bambi glanced at his mother, but she did not seem to be worried about anything, and had her head deep in the grass. But at the other side of the meadow there was something rushing around in circles, just as he had been doing himself earlier on. Bambi was so astonished that he leapt backwards, as if he meant to run away. His mother noticed him and raised her head. "What's the matter?" she called. But Bambi was speechless. He could find no words and merely stammered, There." His mother looked in that direction. "Oh, I see," she said. "That's my cousin, and you're right. She has a little child, too. No, she has two." His mother had spoken cheerfully, but now she became serious. "No, Ina with two children. Really, she has two." Bambi stood and stared. Over there he could see now a figure that looked just like his mother. He had not noticed her before. Now he could see two things that continued moving in circles in the grass, but only their red backs could be seen, thin red stripes. "Come on," said his mother. "Let's go over to them. You'll have some company there." Bambi wanted to run there, but his mother only walked slowly, looking all around her with each step, so Bambi held himself back. He was very excited, though, and very impatient. His mother continued speaking. "I thought we'd come across Ina again sometime. Now, where's she hiding? I knew she had a child, too. That was easy to guess, but two children." They had long been spotted by the others, who now were coming toward them. Bambi had to say hello to his aunt, but he had his eyes only for her children. His aunt was very friendly. "Yes," she said to him. "Now that's Gobbo and that's Feline. You can all play together any time you like." The children stood stiffly, without moving, and stared at each other. Gobbo close beside Feline, and Bambi in front of them. None of them moved. They stood and gaped. "Go on, then," said Bambi's mother. "You'll soon all be friends." "What a nice-looking child," Ina responded. "Really, very nice indeed. So strong and with good posture." "Yes, it's all right," his mother said modestly. "We have to be satisfied with that, but Ina, you've got two children." "Yes, that's what happens now and again," Ina explained. "But you do know, my dear, I've had many children before." "Bambi is my first," said his mother. "Well, you see," Ina reassured her, "it might be different for you, too, the next time." The children were still standing there and watching each other. None of them said a word. Feline suddenly jumped and dashed away. The whole thing had become too boring for her. In an instant, Bambi ran after her, and Gobbo did the same. They rushed around in semicircles. They turned around as quick as a flash. They tumbled over each other. They chased each other up and down. It was wonderful fun. When they suddenly stopped, a little out of breath, they were all good friends with each other. They began to talk. Bambi told them about how he had spoken with the little grasshopper and the whiting. "Have you been talking with the shiny beetle, too?" asked Feline. No, Bambi had never spoken with the shiny beetle. He did not know him at all. He did not know who it might be. "I often talk with him," Feline explained, slightly boastfully. "I was told off by the jay." "Really?" asked Gobbo in amazement. "The jay was cheeky with you, is that?" Gobbo was often in amazement at things, and he was exceptionally modest. Then, he added, the hedgehog pricked me on the nose, but he only mentioned that in passing, as it were. Who is the hedgehog? Bambi asked cheerfully. It felt so wonderful to be standing there, to have friends and to hear so many exciting things. The hedgehog is a terrible creature, exclaimed Feline, covered in big spikes all over his body, and he's very spiteful, too. Do you really think he's spiteful? Asked Gobbo. He never does any harm to anyone. What? Retorted Feline quickly. Didn't he prick you in the nose, then? Oh, that was only because I wanted to talk to him, Gobbo objected, and it was only a little prick. It didn't hurt very much. Bambi went closer to Gobbo. Why did he not want you to talk to him, then? He never wants to talk to anyone, Feline put in. As soon as anyone gets near him, he rolls up into a ball with his spikes sticking out in every direction. Our mother tells us he's one of those people who doesn't want to have anything to do with the world. Perhaps he's just afraid, thought Gobbo. But Feline understood it better. Mother says you shouldn't have anything to do with people like that. Bambi suddenly asked Gobbo, Do you know what it is, this danger? Now the other two became serious, and the three of them put their heads together. Gobbo thought about it. He made a real effort to work it out, as he could see that Bambi was very curious about the answer. The danger, he whispered. The danger. That's something very bad. Yes, Bambi insisted. Yes, something very bad. But what? All three of them shuddered at the horror of it. Feline suddenly called out, loudly and gaily, The danger is when you have to run away from it. She jumped away. She didn't want to stay there and feel afraid. Bambi and Gobbo jumped straight after her. They started to play again and tumbled about in the green and rustling silk of the meadow, where they soon forgot about that serious question. After a while they stopped and stood close to each other, as they had before they began to chat. They looked over to their mothers. They, too, were happily close to each other, eating a little and holding a gentle conversation. Auntie Ina lifted her head and called over to her children, Gobbo, Feline, we've got to go soon. And Bambi's mother warned him too. Come on, Bambi, it's time to go. Oh, not yet, Feline begged crossly. Just a little bit longer? Bambi begged too. Oh, please, let's stay longer, it's so nice here. And Gobbo quietly repeated what they had said. It's so nice here. Just a little bit longer? The three of them spoke at the same time. Ina looked at Bambi's mother. There, what did I tell you? They've already become inseparable. Then something else happened. It was something much bigger than all the things that Bambi had experienced that day. A thumping and a stamping coming out of the woods could be felt all through the ground. The branches of trees cracked, twigs rustled, and before anyone could even prick up his ears it broke its way out of the thicket. One of them with a rustling and a banging, the other in a great rush behind him. They ran forward like a storm wind, completed a broad arch across the meadow, disappeared back into the woods where they could be heard galloping. They hurtled once more out of the thicket, and then they suddenly stopped and stood quietly, 20 paces apart from each other. Bambi looked at them and did not move. They looked a little like his mother and Auntie Ina. But on their heads was a glittering crown of antlers made of brown pearls and bright white prongs. Bambi could not move. He looked at one and then at the other. One of them was smaller than the other, and his crown was less developed too. But the other had a beauty that gave him an air of authority. He held his head high, and his crown was even higher. It sparkled from the darkness into the light. It was adorned with the majesty of many black and brown pearls, and the long white tips glittered. Oh! Exclaimed Feline in amazement. Gobbo repeated her quietly. Bambi, though, said nothing at all. He was captivated and silent. The two of them now began to move, getting further apart from each other as they went, each of them to a different side of the meadow, and there they went slowly back into the woods. The majestic figure came up quite close to the children, Bambi's mother and Auntie Ina. His step showed a quiet glory, and he held his noble head up high like a king and dignified no one with as much as a glance. The children did not dare breathe until he had disappeared back into the thicket. They looked around, trying to see him, but just at that moment the green doors of the wood closed behind him. Feline was the first to break the silence. Who was that? She exclaimed, but her little arrogant voice had a quake in it. In a voice that could hardly be heard, Gobbo repeated her. Who was that? Bambi was silent. Auntie Ina said joyfully, Those were your fathers. Nothing else was said. The group moved apart. Auntie Ina went with her children into the nearest patch of undergrowth. That was the way they always went. Bambi and his mother had to go right across the meadow to the oak tree to get to the route they usually took. For a long time he remained silent until finally he asked, Did they not see us? His mother understood what he meant and replied, "Of course they saw us. They see everything." Bambi felt shy and did not dare ask any more questions, but the wish to do so overcame his shyness. "Why," he began, and then he was silent again. His mother helped him. "What is it you want to say, my child? Why didn't they stay with us?" "They don't stay with us," his mother answered, "only now and then." "Why didn't they speak to us?" His mother said, "They don't speak to us any more, only now and then. We have to wait until they come, and then we have to wait until they talk to us, if they want to." Bambi became cross and asked, "Will my father speak to me?" "Of course he will, my child," his mother promised him. "When you're grown up, he'll speak to you, and sometimes he'll let you be with him." In silence, Bambi went closer to his mother, his mind filled with thoughts of the appearance of his father. "He's so beautiful," he thought, and then again, so beautiful. His mother seemed able to read his mind, and she said, "If you're still alive, my child, if you're clever and avoid danger, you'll be as strong and as beautiful as your father, and you'll carry a crown on your head, just like his." Bambi took a deep breath. His heart became big with happiness and anticipation. Chapter 5. Time went by, and Bambi went through new experiences. It sometimes even made him dizzy having so many things to learn. Now he knows how to listen. Not just hear what is happening nearby, so close that it forces itself into your ears. No, there is certainly no art in that. Now he can listen properly and with understanding to anything that happens, however gently it moves. He can listen through fine rustling that the winds bring in. He knows, for instance, when there is a pheasant running through the undergrowth. He recognizes quite exactly that gentle scurrying that continually stops and then starts again. He can even recognize the mice in the woods from the sound they make as they run to and fro, from their little journeys they make. Then there are the moles who rush around in circles making a rustling noise under the elder bushes when they're in a good mood. He knows the brash, clear call of the falcons, and listens to it as it changes to an angry tone when a hawk or eagle comes close. That makes them cross because they fear their territory might be taken from them. He knows the sound of the woodland pigeons as they flap their wings, the lovely distant swish of the ducks as they flap their wings, and many other sounds. He is slowly learning to understand things by his sense of smell. He will soon understand them as well as his mother. He can understand what he is smelling as soon as he draws in a breath. "Oh, that's clover, and that's rowan," he thinks when the wind is blowing in from the meadow, and he can smell when his friend the hare is outdoors. "I can tell that very well." Also, in among all the smells and leaves, soil and herbs and wild onions, he can tell when the polecat has gone past. By putting his nose to the ground and testing it thoroughly, he can tell that the fox has been there. He might notice that somewhere nearby there are his relatives, Auntie Ina with the children. He is now completely at ease with the night, and no longer feels such a great longing to go and run about in the light of day. Now he is happy to spend his days lying in the little shady space in the undergrowth with his mother. He hears the heat of the air, and he sleeps. Now and then he wakes up and listens and smells, which is the proper thing to do. Everything is as it should be. There are only the little tits who would sometimes chatter with each other. The midges in the grass, who are almost never able to stay quiet, talk amongst themselves, and the wood pigeons never stop proclaiming their gentleness, and do so with enthusiasm. What does all that matter to Bambi? He goes back to sleep. Now he is very fond of the night. Everything is gay, everything is moving. You also, of course, have to be careful in the night time, but you have less to worry about and you can go anywhere you want to. And everywhere you go you come across people you know, and they too will be more carefree than they are at other times. In the night the forest is solemn and silent. There are voices to be heard, but just a few of them, and in all this stillness they seem loud, and they seem different from the daytime voices, and they have more effect. Bambi enjoyed hearing the owl. She seems so dignified as she flies, perfectly silent, perfectly effortless. A butterfly is quiet just because of her size, but the owl is so immense, and her face is so imposing, so determined, full of so much thought. Her eyes are so majestic. Bambi admires her firm gaze with its quiet courage. He enjoys listening when she talked with his mother one time, or anyone else. He stands slightly to one side, a little afraid of that imperious gaze he admires so much. He does not understand much of the clever things she says, but he does know that they are clever, and that enchants him, fills him with admiration for the owl. Then the owl begins her song. "Ha ha, ha ha, ha," she sings. It sounds different from the song of the thrush or the golden oriole, different from the friendly motif of the cuckoo. But Bambi loves the song of the owl because he feels a secretive earnestness in it, an indescribable cleverness, and a mysterious melancholy. Then the tawny owl is there again, a charming little lad. Dignified and faithful and more inquisitive than most, he always wants to stir up a fuss. "Uyik! Uyik!" he calls in a voice that is shrill, terrifying, and very piercing. It sounds as if his life were in danger, but he is cheerful character, and it delights him when he startles someone. "Uyik!" he shouts so loudly that it alarms anyone in the wood within half an hour's distance, and then he has a great gentle cooing laugh just for himself, and you can only hear if you are at the right next to him. Bambi had realized that the tawny owl is pleased when he startles somebody or if somebody thinks something awful has happened to him. And ever since, whenever the tawny owl is nearby, he rushes to him and asks, "Has something happened to you?" And he might sigh and say, "Oh, you really startled me." And the owl feels very satisfied. "Yes, yes," he says with a great laugh. "It's quite a distressing sound, isn't it?" He puffs up his feathers so that he looks like a soft gray ball and looks very charming. A couple of times there was even thunder and lightning, both day and night. The first time it was by day, and Bambi felt how he became afraid when, in his leafy bedroom in the woods, it became darker and darker. It seemed to him that the night had fallen down from the sky in the middle of the day. Then, as the storm roared its way through the woods, so that the mute trees began to groan loudly, Bambi shook with fear. And as the lightning lit up the sky and the thunder roared, Bambi went mad with the horror of it, and thought the world was about to be torn to pieces. He ran behind his mother, who was slightly unsettled, had jumped to her feet, and was walking to and fro in the thicket. He was unable to think, unable to understand. Then the rain burst down in an angry gush. Everyone had hidden himself away. The woods seemed empty, and there was nowhere to flee. Even the thickest undergrowth you were whipped by the water as it rushed through. But the lightning stopped flashing, and its fiery beams no longer flamed their way through the tops of the trees. The thunder moved away, and there was only a distant rumbling to be heard before it was entirely silent. Now the rain became gentler. Its broad patter could only be heard everywhere but powerfully for another hour. The forest stood breathing deeply in the still air and allowed itself to be soaked. No one now was afraid to stand in the open. The feeling was gone, washed away by the rain. Bambi and his mother had never gone out onto the meadow as early as they did that evening. In fact, it was hardly even evening. The sun was still high in the sky, and there was powerful freshness in the air. It had a richer fragrance than at other times, and the woods sang with 1,000 voices, for everyone had come out of its hiding place and was scurrying around each other in their excitement to tell them about what they had just experienced. Before stepping onto the meadow, they had to pass a big oak tree standing right at the edge of the woods, just beside their path. They had to pass by this big, beautiful tree every time they went out onto the meadow. This time there was a squirrel sitting on one of its branches, and he wished them good evening. Bambi and the squirrel were good friends with each other. The first time he met him, Bambi thought the squirrel was a very small deer because of his red coat, and stared at him in amazement. But Bambi really was too young at the time, and simply could not understand anything. Right from the start, he felt an exceptional liking for the squirrel. He was so well-mannered in every way. The way he spoke was so pleasant, and Bambi adored the wonderful way he performed acrobatics. How he climbed, how he jumped, and how he kept his balance. He would take part in the conversation while running up and down the smooth trunk of the tree as if it were nothing at all. He sat upright on the branch of a tree as it moved to and fro. He leaned comfortably against his bushy tail, which rose up high and handsome behind him. He showed his white breast, moved his front paws with great elegance, turned his head to left and right, laughed with merry eyes, and in a very short time he would say so many entertaining or interesting things. Then he came down from the tree again, and did so fast in its jumps that anyone would think he was about to fall down onto your head. He swung his long red tail vigorously and said, "Hello, hello, so nice of you to drop by," while he was still far above Bambi's head. Bambi and his mother stood where they were. The squirrel ran down the smooth trunk. "Now then," he began to chat, "did you understand that all right? I can see, of course, that everything's nice and tidy. And that's always the main thing after all." As quick as a flash, he ran back up the trunk, saying, "No, it's too damp for me down there. Just a moment, and I'll find a better place. I hope you don't mind. Thank you. I thought you wouldn't mind. And we can talk just as well from where we are now." He ran to and fro on a level branch. "What a business that was," he continued. "So much noise, such a scandal that was. Just think how shocked I am. You squeeze yourself into a nook, keep perfectly quiet, hardly daring to move. That's the worst of it all. Sitting there like that without moving. You hope, of course, that nothing's going to happen, don't you? My tree is especially suited, it has to be said. I am content. However far I roam, I don't wish for any other. But when things happen like they did today, it does get you so upset. It's disgusting." The squirrel sat there, his beautiful tail erect close behind him. He showed the white of his breast and held his 2 front paws emotionally pressed against his heart. It was obvious that when he said he had been made cross, he was telling the truth. "We want to go out on the meadow now," said Bambi's mother, "so that we can dry ourselves off in the sunshine." "Oh, what a good idea!" the squirrel exclaimed. "You really are so clever, really. And I always say that you are so clever." With a single leap, he was down on a branch higher up. "There's nothing better that you could do now than go out onto the meadow," he called out. Then he rushed around in nimble leaps hither and thither and up into the canopy of the trees. "I want to get up to where I can get some sunshine," he chatted contentedly. "We're all soaking wet. I want to get right up high." He was not at all concerned about whether anyone was still listening to him. On the meadow, it was already very lively. Bambi's friend the hare was sitting there, with his family all around him. Auntie Ina was standing there with her children and some of the other people she knew. Today, Bambi saw his father again. They came slowly out from the trees, some here, some there. Then someone else appeared. They walked slowly up and down the edge of the woods, each one in his own pace. They paid no attention to anyone. They did not even talk to each other. Bambi frequently looked over at them, respectfully but full of curiosity. Then he talked with Feline, Gobo, and a few other children. He thought it would be all right to play for a little while. All of them said they agreed, and then the running round in circles began. Feline showed that she was the merriest of all of them. She was so lively and nimble, and she sparkled with sudden new ideas. Gobo, though, quickly became tired. He had been so terribly afraid while the storm was raging. It made his heart beat fast, and it was still doing so. Maybe Gobo was a little bit of a weakling, but Bambi loved him because he was so good-natured and so helpful, and never let anyone see it when he was a little bit sad. Chapter 6. Time passes and Bambi learns how good grass tastes, how tender the buds of the leaves are, and how sweet clover is. When he presses himself against his mother to get some refreshment, she often pushes him away. "You're not a little child anymore," she says. Sometimes she will be even more direct and say, "Go away, leave me in peace." Sometimes his mother would even stand up in the middle of the day in their little place in the wood and just walk away without looking to see whether Bambi is following her or not. There are even times when she is walking along the familiar paths and she seems to not notice whether Bambi is trotting behind her like a good boy. One day his mother was not there, and Bambi does not know how that is possible, cannot understand it. But his mother is gone, and Bambi, for the first time, is alone. He is bewildered, he becomes uneasy, he becomes nervous and anxious, and he begins to long for her quite pitifully. Very sadly, he stands there and calls to her. No one answers. No one comes. He listens, he smells the air. Nothing. He calls again, gently. Inside himself, imploringly, he calls, "Mother! Mother!" All in vain. Now he is gripped with doubt as to whether he can endure, so he begins to walk. He wanders all along the paths he knows, stops and calls out, walks on with hesitant steps, fearful and unable to understand. He is very sad. He carries on walking and finds himself on paths he has never been before. He finds himself in parts of the wood that are strange to him. He is lost. Then he hears the voices of 2 children who are calling out like him, "Mother! Mother!" Surely that is Gobo and Feline. It must be them. He runs quickly towards the voices and soon sees their red coats shining through between the leaves. Gobo and Feline. There they are standing next to each other, under a dogwood, looking forlorn and calling, "Mother! Mother!" They're glad that they can see something rustling in the undergrowth, but they are disappointed when they see it is only Bambi. But they are a little bit glad to see him, and Bambi is glad that he is not quite so alone anymore. "My mother's gone away somewhere," says Bambi. "Ours is gone too," lamented Gobo. They look at each other in their dismay. "But where could they be?" asks Bambi, almost in tears. His heart is beating fast and he is feeling quite miserable. Suddenly Feline says, "I think they're with our fathers." Gobo and Bambi look at each other in astonishment. They are immediately gripped with a sense of awe. "You mean with our fathers?" asked Bambi and shudders. Feline shudders too, but she makes a face that seems to be saying a lot. She looks like someone who knows more than he is willing to say. She does not really know anything at all, of course. She does not even know where she got the idea from, But as Gobo repeats, "Do you really mean that?" she makes herself look clever and says each time, "Yes, I think so." That is, of course, a guess, but is at least worth thinking about. It does not make Bambi any less uneasy, though. He is not now capable of thinking, he is too anxious and too sad. He moves away. He does not like to spend too much time on one spot. Feline and Gobo go with him a little way. All three of them call, "Mother, mother!" But now Gobo and Feline have stopped. They do not dare go any further. Feline says, "Where are we going? Our mother knows where we should be. Let's stay here so that she can find us when she comes back." Bambi walks on by himself. He wanders through a thicket where there is a little bare patch. In the middle of the bare patch Bambi stops. It is as if he was held there by his roots, and cannot leave the spot. There, at the edge of the bare patch, in a tall hazel bush, he can make out a form. Bambi has never seen the form like this. At the same time, a scent came to him in the air, a scent he has never smelt before. It is a strange aroma, heavy and sharp and exciting, enough to make you mad. Bambi stares at the form. It is remarkably erect, exceptionally narrow, and it has a pale face which is quite naked on the nose and around the eyes. Horribly naked. This is a face that projects a dreadful horror, cold and gruesome. This face has a monstrous power to it, a power that could leave you crippled. This face is painful to behold, hardly bearable to behold. But Bambi nonetheless stands there and stares at it, captivated. The form remains there motionless for a long time. Then it reaches one leg out, a leg that is positioned up high, and puts it near its face. Bambi has not noticed that it was there at all. This terrible leg stretches right out into the air, and it is merely this gesture that sweeps Bambi away like a candle in the wind. In an instant he is back on the thicket he has just left, and he runs. Suddenly his mother is back with him. She leaps through the bush and the undergrowth next to him. The two of them run as fast as they can. His mother leads the way, she knows the path, and Bambi follows. In this way they keep running until they are at the entrance to their chamber. Did you see that?" asks his mother gently. Bambi cannot answer. He has no breath left. He merely nods. That was him," she says. The two of them shuddered in horror.